looks like we're here once again for an episode of this Wandering Thoughts podcast. I am your host, Joseph Salmieta Jr., and I just like to share my thoughts on what's going on in the world with y'all. Just free rap. Well, it's not really rap, it's free. I'm free versing it, I'm not reading off a script. I probably should be reading off a script, so it sounds right. So I'm politically correct. Who cares about being politically correct? Well then, I do know that one of the things that's been on my mind a lot lately is things like depression and anxiety, and I've been wondering, so what's a cause for that? Why is it so rampant in our country today? By our country, I mean the United States of America. God bless it. What is the cause for this? It can't just be, we're suddenly so very much aware of depression. It can't. I don't buy that. If you look back across centuries and centuries of data, we don't have as high a peak of depression as we do today. And a lot of people, one of the main arguments I hear from a lot of people is, well, it's just because now we're so aware of it and we're testing for it all the time and we have so much intervention for it that the numbers are just so much higher. And if we did the same to the people back then we would have those same numbers. And I look at those people and I wonder, do you look at the world? There are so many things wrong in today's world that weren't wrong back then. I'm not saying back then there weren't issues. There 110% there were issues back then. Civil War, Revolutionary War, Great Britain, money. Money has always been an issue. People have always had a hard time getting money. Food, property, kings, whatever. There was always tumultuous times. But there's a difference. And there are a few things that I've pinpointed based on my research, which you can take me at my word, or I recommend go do your own research. There are a few things I've noticed that just happen to be differences between the times in the past and what we have now. Look, even if we just look at the teenagers, the ones most heavily affected by this, the 11, 13-year-olds to the 25-year-olds, and higher, unfortunately. It shouldn't be there for anyone in such high numbers, but it is. If we look at it, there are a few key things that they're missing that people had and made it a point to have up until technology came about. By technology, I'm going to define that because I've had a few people be like, what do you mean technology? You talking about like refrigerators? No, I'm not talking about refrigerators. I'm talking about computers, phones, televisions, social media. Those are the things I feel have made our lives worse and not better. The internet, I think, is great. I think it's awesome that we have so much access to the information that we didn't have before. Public schools are almost null and void because of this, because all you have to do is go do research online. Granted, there's always the chance for misinformation, but a public school is not as credible as people make it out to be. That's a whole nother topic. But I'm going to go back to what I was talking about before, and there are a few things I've noticed that really are lacking in the population in the United States and aren't lacking in countries where we're looking like, oh my gosh, why do these people have such great lives? Oh, it's because of the food they eat. They eat kelp. That's why. No. Look at those countries and look at our country. What do we have in our country? We have rampant social media use. That's point one. If you look at a country like Indonesia, I know a lot. Is it Indonesia that people always look at? Some Eastern countries that are like they're islands and they're just cultural families, and they've got a mother and a father and a grandfather and a grandmother and an aunt and uncle, and they've got 3 or 4 kids, maybe more, and they're living great lives. They're happy. It's not like they don't have hardships. There's plenty of hardships. They get hit by hurricanes and major storms. You're in the middle of a freaking ocean. You're gonna get hit by a storm, but they have far higher happiness than we do in the United States, which doesn't make sense. They often don't have thousands upon thousands of dollars. They don't have houses with air conditioning and heaters. They don't have TVs and toasters and ovens. Well, some do, but this is a generalization. And refrigerators and all these things that we have that make modern life quote unquote great. Look, don't get me wrong. I love having a refrigerator. Open it up, throw your food in there, sits for a week, you still can eat it. That's a lot better than having an ice box outside that you have to constantly fill with ice, or digging a hole several feet deep so your food stays cold. Especially, like, can you imagine doing that in the southern states? It wouldn't work. You'd have to dig so deep, and then it gets really muddy and yucky. Where I live, it's wet, and it's not even as wet as it is in, like, South Carolina or Georgia or Alabama or Louisiana, for goodness sake. Okay, back on topic. Social media use. What is the problem with social media use? Well, there are a few things. One is dopamine. If any of you seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix, you'll know what I'm talking about. Dopamine. When you get that like, when you get that follow, when you get that comment on your post, on your profile, what do? You get happy. Your brain goes, this is great. We should do another one. We should have another post. See, this is how we did it. And then when we don't get that adoration from another post that's equally, in our opinion, as great, we feel down and upset, like, oh. And then we constantly check, like, who commented, who liked my post, who followed me because of this post. And it goes further, and we're constantly scrolling. Our brains are wired to respond to things like social media in a way that's detrimental, and that is, we constantly want that dopamine. And when our brain is working properly, that dopamine comes from long-term things, like reading a book. You don't get an immediate dopamine hit from reading a book. It's gradual. You have to read the whole book. Watching a television show is a bit of a stretch there. If we're talking about going on a hike, talking with your friends and family, that's a longer-term dopamine hit. Doing the hard work to get the thing out of it, long-term dopamine hit. Those types of things build our brains to enjoy hard work, to enjoy the things that bring greater meaning to life, like church, family, books, hard work, the things that we do on a daily basis, that we used to do on a daily basis and don't do so much now. So when you go through Instagram and you're scrolling, you're getting a short-term dopamine hit because you're like, oh, a new post. Yes, awesome. This feels good. It looks great. Even if it's a terrible post of some ugly fat woman, it's still, yes, a post. I love it. My brain is so happy right now. I got another dopamine hit. And people are so blind that they don't realize it until they've been on Instagram for 6-7 hours a day, and the app that they downloaded to track their social media use is screaming at them saying, hey, look, you've been on here for 6 hours. What are you doing? Unfortunately, as far as I know, those apps don't do that. They just say, here, this is how long you've been on social media. Idiots. You gotta beat it into their brains. No, please don't do that, actually. That would be terrible. We don't need any more suicides on our hands. Point is, it's a dopamine hit. And if you go short-term dopamine over long-term dopamine, what happens? You start to not enjoy life as much. Because then things like reading a book are not as enjoyable as it used to be. Because you're used to opening your phone and scrolling and finding a post that you love. You're used to grabbing TikTok and watching 500, 600, 700 videos and feeling great about yourself. You're used to these types of easy things. And if we're looking at the eastern countries, specifically the islands, the eastern islands, don't get me wrong, I feel like west versus east, the west is better for the most part, but that's a different argument. If you look at the eastern islands, you're going to find the people there tend to do the things that produce long-term dopamine hits. Family, food growing, hunting, things like that. Telling stories. Do you know how much effort goes into telling a story? If you've never written a story, you can shut up. Because it takes so much time and brain power to write a good story that people enjoy. It doesn't come overnight. It just doesn't. And the art of telling a story is even harder. At least for me it is. Because you have to craft the words right. Get your tone of voice perfect. Your facial expressions, your body movements. If you don't do it right, nobody's going to be interested in your story. So you got to pour time and effort into what you're doing before it's even viable to share with other people. And then that takes practice, which is another thing in the United States and other Western countries like Canada, in some Eastern countries like the UK, which I do wonder, at what point do you stop considering a country Eastern and start considering it Western? That's another topic. So social media use is big. We use it far too much. Kids especially, having phones at 10, 11 years old, having Instagram, having TikTok, it's not healthy. Because then, not only are they getting that dopamine hit, but if you're a girl, and I hate to sound sexist because I'm not, but if you're a girl, you look at it and you see perfect, beautiful models with perfect, beautiful bodies, and you look at yourself and you go, I hate myself. I need to fill in the blank. That doesn't help. That leads to greater depression and greater suicide rates. It's in the statistics. If you don't believe me, go do your research. That's the whole point of this. Go do your research. Second, phones themselves ties into the social media thing. You get a notification. You get another notification, another, and another, and another. You get a text. You get a phone call. You've got this supercomputer in your pocket, which is great. You're having an argument with someone. You pull out your phone, Google some facts. You win. Woohoo! Or your flight just got canceled. Crap, you got to get home in time for Christmas. You can book another flight just like that, barring the fact that you don't have any money. Yes, phones are useful. I will not deny that. However, I will deny that they have no evils. They have plenty of evils. Look at the research we have so far on phones. Number one is addictive. They are addictive. And I know the word addictive gets thrown around way too much these days. I'm addicted to my phone. I'm addicted to my penis. I'm addicted to my television. I'm addicted to my lamp. You're not addicted to your lamp, man. Get over it. Point being, the word addicted, addictive, addiction is thrown around way too much today. But when it comes to phones, it's warranted based upon the research that we have. However, phones are good to an extent. If you use them in moderation, then great. As said on Social Dilemma, they were quoting. Well, they were quoting. I'm going to quote them actually. Tools. A phone is a tool. It's meant to be used. When a tool is using you, when it's controlling you, it's a paraphrase, by the way. Then it's no longer a tool, and you have to take action against that. A phone is a great tool. I stress that word tool. It's an awesome tool, but it's nothing more. It should not be our lives. We should not be sitting on a train and texting or browsing Instagram or Twitter. We should be looking at the people around us and conversing. I don't care if you're scared. I have social anxiety, and I still want to get to know people. I want to talk to people and hear what they have to say and learn from them. You will always learn something from someone if you take the time to talk and listen. That's how life works. You're not going to learn too much if you're staring at your phone all the time. And not only is your phone addictive, it's also taking away from other important things like reading, writing if you're a writer, singing, other hobbies, just hobbies in general, because we can fill our time with scrolling through social media and our email and everything that is on our phones because we want to feel good. That's the purpose. We want to feel good. Everything we do is designed to make us feel good. Even hobbies are designed to make us feel good. However, hobbies are also constructive. If you do a hobby, you're learning something. Your brain is working. Everybody's brain needs to be working on a regular basis. You do not want those things to die. So exercise and making your brain think and learn are great. However, when you get a phone, your brain is not doing that. Sure, you'll learn something. Maybe you're watching Jordan Peterson. That's great. I will never condone anyone for watching Jordan Peterson unless their only thing they do is watch Jordan Peterson. Then you have a problem. Get off your couch and go outside and get some sunlight and rethink your life. Jordan Peterson didn't create these videos so that you would sit down and do nothing with your lives. That's not his point. His point is go do something with your life that is worthwhile and makes your life worth living. So phones are good tools, but there's too many evils that go along with them. And with the age of the phone, we've also seen a rise in things like depression and suicide because we aren't getting what we're supposed to get from life. People. We're not getting interaction with people anymore. There's no more face-to-face conversations. I shouldn't say that. There's far less face-to-face conversations than there were 40 years ago. Okay? And you're like, oh, that's 40 years ago. Think about it. Your mom was a kid 40 years ago. At least my mom was. It's not something that changed overnight. Phones, the first phone came out, 10, 11 years ago? Something like that? 11 or 12 years ago. It doesn't happen overnight. And part of the problem with things like phones is nobody did the research on them. It's like cigarettes. Think about it. When cigarettes first came out, people touted them to be the cure to illnesses, the cure to things like bronchitis and asthma. They were like, hey, you have asthma? Smoke this cigarette. You're going to get better. That's not how it works. And what we found after 65 years since the first cigarette came out was that they're detrimental to our health. They're addictive. They give us lung cancer. They ruin our body and our cells. We're tired all the time. And then we become so addicted to them that when we try to come off of them, we have horrible withdrawal symptoms. We get depressed, we get anxious, fidgety. We have to be doing something with our mouth at all times. A lot of smokers go from smoking packs of cigarettes to chewing packs of gum, or they go from smoking packs of cigarettes to eating way too much food. I have an uncle who was a smoker, and I'm so proud of him for quitting. But he got a little on the heavy side because of that, because he had to do something with his mouth. That isn't the concern. The concern is it's addictive and it has detrimental side effects. Now, I'm not saying being fat is a good thing. In fact, if you're fat, you should do something about it. And if you are doing something about it, I applaud you for that. And if you're doing something about it, it's like, I love my body, you're an idiot. Go get some mental help. All right, so we have phones, we have social media. And yes, if you're thinking I'm very blunt, I am very blunt, and I don't care. Social media and phones. 2, they go hand in hand. What else? Well, I mentioned 1, lack of human interaction. Kids go to school in part to have social interaction. That's the main argument against homeschooling, is your kids don't get as much social interaction as they would if they went to public school. And that is a valid argument for the sole reason that kids need social interaction in order to grow their brains and learn how social interaction works, and what should and should not be said and what should and should not be done in certain scenarios. I'm not saying we need to be legalistic about how we raise our kids and how they interact with other people. I am saying there's a time and a place for everything. Like if I went into the president's office right now and I said, you ugly idiot, what are you doing to our country? You fill in the blank with a whole bunch of slurs and stuff. That's not the right time for that. In fact, there should never be a time for insulting somebody. Unless you're a comedian, that's a different story. However, there's a time and a place, right? And that's what going to school helps teach kids. Yes, there are problems with school. There's bullying. There's poor education. There's indoctrination. However, you need the social interaction. And adults these days also don't get as much social interaction. We work from home. COVID and all the regulations around COVID have made adults go from working a 9 to 5 in the office, which is not healthy either, to working from home and prioritizing family time, which is great. I think that's awesome. Families have been so neglected in the nuclear world. It's ridiculous. Why did I say nuclear world? The nuclear family has been rejected in the modern Western world. So when a father comes home and he's working at home, or a mother comes home and she's working at home, and then they have dinner for the first time in 8, 10, who knows how many years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years with their family, and they're like, oh, so hey, Johnny, how was school today? Yeah, that's so quintessential to... That's not quintessential. It's so basic. It's like your classic kids show on television. Hey, Johnny, how was school today? Sure. It's such a dumb question to ask, but it's essential to forming the bond between parent and kid. If you aren't asking your kid how their day was and what they learned and what was their best part of the day and what they learned that they needed to work on, your kid is going to be an alien to you. You're going to wake up one morning, they're going to be 18 years old, and you're not going to know what happened. Being involved in your kid's life is amazing. It's what makes a parent such a great parent if they're involved in their kid's life. So this pandemic, while it sucked, and while how politicians handled it sucked, it worked for the benefit of families, unless you were in an abusive household, for which I am so sorry. That should never happen. And yes, I admit there are evils in parenting, but that should not wipe nuclear families off the board. Back to social interaction. Kids being locked away in their homes to do school on a computer, which has already been shown to provide substantial issues to a kid, including addictions and increased levels of depression, therefore increased levels of suicide. They aren't interacting with people, and people are essential. They are essential to, as I said, to the development of a young mind and to happiness. Look, a lot of people in the Western world are pursuing happiness through money, through women, through fast cars, through food, through television, through religion. What matters is that there are a few cores to happiness. Number one, as a Christian, I see it as God. If you don't have God, I don't see you being as happy and joyful as a non-Christian. That's not saying you can't be. It's not saying you can't be at all. Like a Jew and some Muslims and Christians often rank as the highest people on the happiness scale. However, without social interaction, even a Christian is going to fall short on happiness. And happiness isn't everything. Believe me, as someone who suffers through a lot of physical issues, physical ailments, I know happiness isn't everything. Life is not happy. Life is pain, and you have to get that into your head as early as possible. However, having people around you, for this example, in pain makes the pain easier to bear. If I didn't have friends, I would not have made it through as successfully as I have through the pain that I went through. Why? Because my friends were there for me. They supported me. They gave me something to do. They gave me something to take my mind off my pain. That's what friends are for. If you're locked away all day long, staring at your phone, not talking to people, where? I ask you, where is the benefit of people coming from? You might say, well, I have online friends. So do I. They're great. But there's nothing like sitting down with a friend on their bed, in the kitchen table, just sitting and talking for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and coming out of there, your mind is clearer. I say this from experience. Dude, I am at least partially introverted. Sometimes talking to people, no. Always. Talking to people I don't know is utterly terrifying, but it's always good. Unless it's like your mom and she's mad at you. Never mind. Nope, that's not good. Time to run. Flee. Whew, I'm out. But if it's a stranger who's shady, sure, don't go talk to them. If you got bad vibes from someone, don't talk to them. But overall, talking to people is a good thing. Interacting with them, hugging them. I know hugs are such taboo with COVID, and then in the Western world, people don't touch each other enough. That is essential to happiness. I'm sorry if you hate hugs. You need hugs to have a good mental state. I've heard anywhere from 12 to 16 hugs a day. True hugs, not just some guy running close over. He's like, oh, let me hug you. I'm a random stranger. I hug. No. 12 to 16 is what I've heard. Real hugs a day. Someone you love comes over to you and just embraces you. And it's a nice, warm embrace. We also need touch. Touch is important. There's a reason why when babies are born, they have to be with their mothers. That's why I don't like this whole COVID thing where the parent is not allowed to hold their baby. I don't care if you're scared the baby's going to get COVID. What's more important? The baby might get COVID, or the baby needs to hold the mother, and the mother needs to hold the baby so the baby can have a properly working emotional system. You're going to screw the baby up from the birth, the minute they're born, if they don't get that hug, that warmth, that skin-on-skin contact. It's vital. I'm serious. It's vital. And when people are dying, I just recently saw an article about because they don't let people in when a COVID patient is dying, they have to use warm water-filled surgeon gloves and put those on top of the hands to provide some semblance of comfort. Do you know how disturbing that is to me as someone who values people and values connections? If I was dying and the doctors came in and said, oh, we're so sorry, your husband... Oh, my husband. I'm not gay. Is my brain okay today? Your wife can't come in because you have COVID and you're dying. So we're going to put these gloves on your hand. Not on. Like, they don't slide your hand in, but they sandwich your hand between two gloves and tie them together, and they're filled with warm water. The idea is you feel comfort from that. It's not the same thing. I hope robots never take over the emotional needs of humans. From sex to hugs to laughter, we need that from physical warm-blooded human beings to function well. So what do we have? To recap, we've got phones, social media, and lack of human interaction. Sunlight. We really need sunlight in order to truly live happy. And I hate saying happy because happiness is such a stigma today, especially in churches. They're like, oh, God only wants what's good for you. You only get the good stuff. No, that's bullcrap. However, sunlight is proven to help people with depression fight off their depression with vitamin D, and it helps promote serotonin. If I'm wrong, I'll correct it. Do your own research on it. I did mine because I went through a whole slump where I was dealing with depression real bad. but it helps you feel alive. It's like it's one of those things that if you're addicted to sunlight, I might not be too upset with you, unless it's getting in the way of your life. In which case, I might say, dude, get some help. Otherwise, if you're like, it's sunny out, I need to go outside. We're watching a movie. Hey, I'm gonna go outside for a little bit. It's sunny. I'm not gonna condemn you for that, dude. I would join you because it would remind me. Oh yeah, I need sunlight. I sit in a semi-dark room all day long. I need sunlight. And for personal experience, I can tell you, sunlight makes me happy. Sunlight and walking make me happy because exercise is key to fighting depression. And not just fighting depression, but staving off depression. It strengthens our mind. It strengthens our muscles. It keeps us active, keeps our blood flowing. People who exercise are the happiest people I've ever seen. And the people who don't exercise are the most downhearted people I've ever seen and met and talked to. You can't just really go off of what you see on the internet. I will grant you that. Candace Owens. Oh my word. She seems like the happiest lady on earth. Who else? Gina Florio. She exercises on a regular basis. She goes through some terrible crap sometimes. She's so happy. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. A lot of you might know him. He's happy. I'm not saying they have perfect lives. By far, they do not have perfect lives. But they work out. They get the endorphins. They get the feeling of, I did this, therefore I can feel productive and good about myself. I was listening to a podcast yesterday by Chris Williamson. I think that's his name. And he was saying, he had a clip, and he was saying, you thinking is not productivity. And while it makes you feel productive, it's a false sense of productivity. And I was just sitting there thinking, like, wow, this guy's right. I look at my own life, and I think a lot about a lot of things that are going on in the world. From suicide to depression to leftism versus rightism. Is it called rightism? It's called the right? Conservatism versus liberalism. Down to, like, earth problems. Like, is our food good? Are we healthy? Is our guts okay? Are our guts okay? Anything that I think about, I think deeply on. And it makes me feel good. I'm like, oh, hey, I figured something out today. I learned something new in thinking and doing research. Don't get me wrong. You should always be thinking. Unless you're thinking about wrong things, in which case, get your head out of the gutter and get your head out of the mud and start thinking about what is right and what is good. Go outside, get some exercise when you're thinking like that. But you have to couple thinking with action. Because if you don't couple thinking with action, you're going to hate yourself. Believe me. I've been there. Still am there. You don't like how you're living, so you start thinking more about it, and you get stuck in this rut where it's always like, I need to do something. This is why I need to do something, and you never do it. However, so we have human touch, sunlight, vitamin D is important, serotonin, exercise, strengthens the mind, makes you literally smarter by working out. So if you ever see a jock at school and he's like, well, maybe not a jock. If you see a guy at school and he's ripped, don't ever look at him and be like, you're going to get D's in class, dude. Actually, he might, because schools are designed to not help boys learn, but that's a different story. However, being ripped doesn't mean you're dumb. It actually makes your brain smarter, unless you're taking steroids, in which case you're just going to be dumb anyway. You started out dumb and you got dumber because you took steroids. All right, so we have phones, we have social media, lack of human interaction, and we have sunlight, and then we have exercise. And I think these 5 things are key to not only fighting depression, but also staving off depression. Because if you've got these 5 things in place, and you've got the discipline to do them every single day, even if it's only a small bit, like maybe you only go for a 10-minute walk because you're feeling so lousy. That's great, man. That's awesome. But I look at the Western world and I see that this is lacking. I don't see it very often, and the people I do see it in, I admire because they seem to have a grasp on what makes life great. And I'd add a 6th one, as much as it will seem controversial, and I would add the 6th one is religion, specifically like Christianity or Judaism, even though I believe that Christianity, and by Christianity I mean Jesus Christ, is the only way to heaven and true salvation. Having a religion gives you something to strive for. It gives a purpose to life when life is hopeless. As a Christian, just because life is dark doesn't mean that God doesn't have a plan in it. And in the end, I know that there's heaven awaiting me if I die tomorrow, or if the world goes to hell in a handbasket today. And sometimes it's hard to recognize that hope. I will grant that. It's very hard, especially if you're a new Christian. But religion gives a purpose to life, especially when life is hopeless. And if you don't have that, people often search for it in other things, which leads to things like addictions. You have to have a purpose in life and something that gives you hope. Otherwise, there is no reason to live. Without purpose, there is no reason to go on. If you don't have a purpose, you need to find one. That's just the reality of life. A lot of people find their purpose in other people, and that's fine. That's great. But there's a higher calling that all people feel the need to fill with something else. When people aren't Christians, what are they? They're atheists, and they fight for their atheism. What are they? They're leftists. They fight for their social justice. What are they? They're Islamics. I don't have a problem with Muslims, I mean. I don't have a problem with Muslims. I don't. In fact, I would love to sit down and talk with one and get to know their religion a little bit better. However, there's a problem when you take it to the extreme level. And when you're going around killing women, children, and men because they don't practice the Islamic faith, there's a problem there. And that's the point. The point is, if there isn't a true purpose and a pure purpose to that, a purity to that purpose, it's going to be convoluted. Christianity is as pure religion as I can think of, but it has its dark moments. I don't care how you feel about the Crusades. It's dark. I don't care how you feel about the Catholic Church killing people for not being Catholic. It's dark. Protestants and Baptists fighting each other. I think that's dumb. But at its core, its very core, it is such a pure religion, and it gives you a purpose for living. Your purpose is, I have a God, and he rescued me. He sent his only son to die for me. And because of it, I am now saved. And I know that when I die, I'm going to heaven. Because of this, I should honor him in the way that I live. And then that causes you to live a more moral life. Christians who I see who are true Christians, not just people who say they're Christians, as much of Americans do, but true Christians who I see and admire, they live their lives to the highest standard they can. And those people, they lie the least. They deal with conflict the best. They're happier. I'm not saying their lives are perfect. They're far from perfect. Being a Christian means you're going to be persecuted. I can't deny that. But what I am saying is religion gives purpose, and purpose gives meaning to life. If you don't have a purpose, you need to find one. 7th, the food we eat. I love how this is starting to sound like a weird book or an article, a conspiracy theorist article. Watch out for the food you eat. They've put microchips in it. It's going to get in your bloodstream. You got a leaky gut? You're microchipped now, boy. No. Okay, no. Ugh, those people disgust me. But food, we eat a lot of heavily processed foods, high in sugar and low in the healthy fats, high in the unhealthy fats, even though people say they're healthy. Fake butter, oils are not actually that healthy for you when you cook with them. Fast foods, things like hamburgers, processed food, especially things like bread and pastas. Those types of foods promote a sugary diet, which promote fat, and fat is not healthy. Excess fat, I should say. When you are 270 pounds and 5'4", you are fat. I don't care what the world tells you, you're fat and you need to get some help. It's not healthy. Your body literally cannot do it. Your brain has an issue with it. But when we eat these unhealthy foods, they go into our guts and they feed things like parasites and bacteria. Once again, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's not. And let me explain. Every human being has parasites and bacteria and fungus in their gut. But when it's a healthy gut, you have the good bacteria and the good things in there, keeping everything in check. But all it takes is something to come in and wreck it. Antibiotics do a wonderful job of that. A conventional study recently came out and showed that antibiotics do more harm than good because they completely wipe the gut and then allow painful, bad things in. And it's caused the medical society to question their use of antibiotics, which I think is great. Because if you are giving somebody antibiotics on a regular basis and their gut is screwed up because of that, their brain is going to be screwed up because of that. And if you look at in America, what do we have that's a problem? A lot of us eat unhealthily. We tend to have things like bloating or excess gas or maybe some nausea. A lot of Americans have acid reflux, and then a lot of us have depression. You could argue, well, correlation doesn't equal causation, but if you look at it on a deeper level, for starters, we don't even truly understand how the body works, so medicine cannot be proclaimed to be good because we don't know how the body truly works. Second, based on the research we do have, we find that the people with the healthy guts, who don't have acid reflux, who don't have bloating, who don't have nausea on a regular basis, excess gas, also tend to have a healthier mind and can do things on a much higher productivity level. So the question here is, so why is the food doing this? Because it promotes something that bacteria eats, sugar. In fact, a few people, especially those with dyslexia and autism, can get drunk off eating things like bread, because that's how the bacteria in their stomachs turn the food into something else. So when we eat a diet that's high in processed fats and processed foods and fake sugar and fake salt, why would we expect that to not cause problems? Think about it. Back in the 1600s, what were they eating? Sure, they had bread and they had sugar, but sugar was far less easily accessible. What do they eat a lot of? They ate a lot of meats, vegetables, and breads. They had milk on a regular basis, not pasteurized milk. They had just straight up raw milk, which is found to have better bacteria for your gut, and it's safer in the long run. Yes, there's a risk, but at what point does freedom have to be taken over by safety? And in the matter of milk, I don't think anybody should be regulating milk, just straight up. That's a different story. Again, another different story. Point being, if you eat healthy, and I don't mean healthy by the food pyramid standards, I mean healthy by the nutrients you're getting from the food. I don't mean healthy by doctor standards, I mean healthy by you eat whole fats, you're eating carbohydrates, cholesterol, that's it. You're eating the cholesterol foods like red meat that people say gives you a heart attack when in reality it does not. You're eating your eggs. You're eating healthy. You're putting sugar way down. You're putting processed foods and junk foods way down. And you're eating meats and vegetables as a core. You're going to have a much healthier lifestyle overall. And then you couple that with sunlight, humans, exercise, less social media use, less technology use. I can't see that as a recipe for disaster. Unless you're all in without having the finances for it, in which case that's a you problem. But if you look at Eastern cultures, specifically the ones on the islands that everyone looks to and promotes on the television, yeah, their lives aren't perfect, but they're happier because A, they're in touch with nature. And everybody knows, well, they should know by now, nature produces a calming effect. Second, they don't have access to all the technology that we do. Thirdly, they prioritize family, and family is very important. It's the same thing as having a really close friend. If your family is good, that is. They prioritize food. And I don't mean this is like healthy eating. I mean the food they have access to is healthier for them than the food we choose to have access to. They eat their meats, their fish, their vegetables. They eat a diet conducive to healthy gut function, therefore healthy brain function. They exercise. Dude, you cannot exercise in an environment where you don't have a Jaguar. And by Jaguar, I mean a car. The car Jaguar. That goes zoom zoom all around the roads. You have to chop your firewood. Gather your sticks. Prepare your food. Sew your own clothing. Build your hut. Repair your hut. In today's world, we get everybody to do everything for us. So in that regard, they have the exercise. And they're outside. They get their sunlight all day long. Unless, even though if the women spend their time inside, sewing clothing or making food, they still have to go outside at some point. I don't see an Eastern culture like the ones we find on some of the islands. While it maybe feel more primitive, who knows? Who knows how primitive we should consider them compared to us? We squabble over racism, we squabble over fake racism. We squabble over petty things that don't exist but in the minds of the perpetrators. However, I think that if we make a time and a place for all the things that are healthy and that I've listed before in this podcast, the food, the people, the less technology use, the more time spent outside, the more we put meaning into our lives and take responsibility for ourselves and the things in our lives that we need to take responsibility for, I think the happier and better our lives are going to get. Solely because when you take responsibility, you're realizing the world sucks, but I can make my life better. Instead of going, ha ha ha, the world sucks and it's the world's fault that my life sucks and I can't do anything about it. So now I'm going to feel depressed and anxious over the fact that life has screwed me over. And I'm going to use this as an excuse for why the government should support me. We live in a world where people believe that the government should support them and the government should do this for them and the government should provide their food and their safety and their housing and their family and tell them how they should live. That's not the way we were designed. If you look at the true people, the people who live their lives to the fullest, they take responsibility for themselves. They do what they can to make their lives the best that they can. They exercise, they eat well. They interact with people. They don't harm their bodies with excess drugs and alcohol. They do what they can to live a life conducive to good life. Just straight up. And so I feel that if America, the Americans and the Canadians and some of those people in Europe, those idiot French, those dumb British, well, we're all dumb, but if we all started to live a life less focused on things and more focused on responsibility and healthy things and interacting with people, the things that are wholesome and true, the things that people look at and go, that's great. When a community surrounds a person who's suffering, when a community comes together and supports someone who lost their house, we all are warmed to the core by this. But this is how we were designed to live. So I feel, based on the evidence, that the way to a true life is through religion, is through exercise, is through responsibility, personal responsibility, it's through healthy eating, it's through family, it's through less technological use, and it's through enjoying the little things in life. Choosing to look at the sunset and say, wow, that's beautiful. Choosing to go for a 10-minute walk with your 5-year-old kid before you go to work or after you get home. Choosing to play with your kid. Choosing to hang out with your friends. Making the choice to live a better life. In a world where choices aren't left up to you, how radical is it to make the choice yourself?